Hi, and welcome back to your second half of research online. I have added many tools for you to use as we move online. There are videos that I've created. I've created discussion boards, and there's a video on how to use those. So just take some time to look at your D2L as we move forward. If you have questions, I've created a discussion board for questions. I'm creating this PowerPoint presentation so that you can hear me and I can add some things to the information. I have added a survey to see if y'all can access Elsevier. You should also be able to access Elsevier and the page burst. And there's another resource on there that I think will be helpful. I've added some supplemental PowerPoint, supplemental information that you can look at. I just want you to have everything you need to be able to navigate as we move forward. Okay. Um, let's move to the next slide here. Okay, we're going to talk about how we collect data. And before we do that, though, real quick, let's talk about where we've been. Okay, so we've been through the processes of distinguishing quantitative versus qualitative studies, mixed method studies. We've looked at strength of evidence. What's a research study versus a non-research study? We talked about ethics and IRB and protection of human subjects. We talked about asking the right question, hypotheses, research methods. And now we're going to talk a little bit about how to collect data. We looked at literature reviews. We're going to talk a little bit more about meta-analyses and systematic reviews in this lecture. And then we talked about sampling, finding the population of interest. How do we access those? We're going to talk about how do we collect the data, different tools in this lecture. In the upcoming weeks, we're going to finish off the semester after exam 2 with internal and external validity, reliability, sensitivity. Within the instrument and within the study, we're going to look at analyzing the data. So we're collecting the data, we're going to analyze the data. Is it statistical analyses, or we're using words to make themes? We're going to look at the critique process. Some of you have sent me your critiques. Excellent. Keep them coming. Articles for critiques. We'll look into that. And then we're going to finish up with some different kinds of research that we're going to just touch on or highlight. Moving forward, we want the collection data process to be objective and organized, and we want to be able to rely on that data to be able to generalize it back to our population that we've studied and the population on a broader sense. It's really fundamental to the entire process, and we want to understand where the data come from. Was it a source data, secondary data? Was it from an instrument? Was it novel data? Where did we get that information? So we're going to look at that as well. We are going to talk about all these different types of methods of data collection: tests, questionnaires, interviews, focus groups, observations, biophysical data, existing or secondary data, and meta-analyses. We're going to talk about strengths and weaknesses of each of these, so let's be prepared for that. Our types of data, then we have accessible, existing data, secondary analysis, pre-existing reports, chart reviews, retrospective studies based on a chart review. We do have some concerns about bias with this, but this is data or information that we can access to collect data that's already in existence. This is where our evidence-based practice is really founded on. Then we have our new data, novel data, new tools or existing tools that are used in a new way to collect new data. And that should say primary data, not primary date. So we're looking at a new way of collecting the data or using that tool or instrument to look at new information or a new population. Sources of data, again, all of our secondary sources can come from a very supply chain or accessibility. Internet has given us greater accessibility with Medicare, Medicaid, national surveys, demographic indicators, clinical and non-clinical data, as well as comments from the public, informant groups, questionnaires, screenings, epidemiological surveys, etc. So there's many ways we can access existing data. We have to be careful too when we're doing data collection with the Hawthorne effect, which is that the participants are going to give us what they think we want, not what we really want, or try to do better because they know they're a participant in the study. We want our inter-rater reliability to be at least 90%, so we want it high. So that means that the information that we've collected is the same in many ways. Either we're collecting information from a test pilot of a tool that we get our experts to review, or with our replication of study using the same tool. These topics are found on page 247 in your book. We now want to start with our different types of methods. So with our testing methods, then we want to, that's really a test is really a quantitative data collection mechanism. And we can do that with emotional intelligence, IQ, talents, GREs, what else? All different kinds of testing that we can do, and we get lots of information. We can appraise the aptitude of folks and things like that. So look at that as far as testing goes. We have strength of testing. We get consistency. We have a high rate of validity and reliability with the data. We use it for group setting up groups in the group setting. It's multiple people can take it at the same time. We have access to different types of tests and those kinds of things. And then we're going to talk about limitations of those tests. Can be pricey if someone is charging you for the use of the test. There is a bias that's presented. It does not allow for any open-ended or qualitative type questioning. And if someone doesn't complete the test, what do we do with that? That can be a concern. Then our questionnaires, again, for quantitative data collection, we usually use survey. And with that, we gather information concerning knowledge, attitudes, beliefs, feelings. We use a Likert type scale questionnaire mostly, and then we can get a range of answers. Take a look at box 11-1 on page 250 and box 11-2 on 252. This talks about types of questionnaires and how to create a questionnaire and what's really important about questionnaires, like the questions have a single focus, that we ask the same information in a different way. So you may think that you've already answered that question in a way, but it's really to get at some different information. So take a look at those boxes in your textbook. Strengths of questionnaires, we can do it in a big group setting. We can do it online. We get a really big sense of anonymity. It enhances the quality of our data when we have anonymity and everybody's asked the same questions. And we can get high validity and reliabilities using these type tools. There is some weaknesses or limitations to using questionnaires. They have to be short or participants won't complete them. If we tell them that it's long and they know ahead of time, we might have better participation. And it's a self-reporting type tool, and we want them to complete it, but it can take time. Another type of data collection method is our interviews. We use our interviews mostly with qualitative data collection. We get a personal touch. We have to be able to put our biases aside, and we have to develop a trust with our interviewers that they understand the intent of the interview, and we have to get our questions together. We ask the open-ended, and we can ask closed-ended questions. With our open-ended questions, that gives the freedom of the person responding to our questions the length and breadth to give us really good information regarding the test, the interview items, sorry. And the strength of those interviews is not so structured. We can get richness of data, and it's freely structured so the interviewee can fully answer the questions. We can ask follow-up questions. We see their nonverbals. We can get a lot of information, and we just want to understand what the interviewee is trying to tell us based on the information we're trying to gain. Weaknesses can be time consuming, expensive. Let's say I have 12 to 15 participants and I need to spend an hour with me and I'm the only one interviewing. If you have helpers or assistants that can help with the amount of time spent, and it requires interaction with the persons, we have to be leery of the Hawthorne effect and that we want to try to minimize that. And it can be cumbersome because of the information we get. However, we do have computer programs that help us with that these days, which is really beneficial to the researcher. Our next type of method for gathering data is the focus group. Mostly qualitative data is collected here. We usually have groups of 3, 4, 5, 6 persons and they participate in the group. We usually last 1 to 3 hours. The focus groups are more lengthy than the interview because we have multiple participants in the group. We have to have a leader and they have to understand the purpose of the meeting, and we need to provide a safe environment for them to be able to share that information. That information. Strength of focus groups, same as for interviews. We need a moderator. The groups need to understand what's going on. Then the interviewer can get a complete picture of what's going on. We can look at ideas and concepts, and we can again check on those nonverbals. Some limitation is sizing and management of the groups. The moderator must know the process. The moderator must be able to handle and guide the group and not let the extroverts or the people that talk all the time monopolize the conversation, if you will. They need time for the introverts to respond as well. Another observation is another method of data collection. Mostly qualitative data is collected here. As with the interviews and the group interviews and the observation, if we use a tool to ask the questions to elicit responses, and if we can get numbers from them, like how do you feel out of a scale of 1 to 10, if we use the tools in that way, we can get a quantitative sense of what's happening. So these can both also be used in quantitative data collection, but it is more cumbersome than just using a different type of tool to collect. But with our observations, we're just looking at what the group or the individual's doing, right? It's descriptive, it's behavioral, and we can or cannot participate in what's going on as the observer. We're going to talk different types of observing, but most of the time this is for qualitative data collection. Then here's the different types of roles as the observer. I've given you some extra help as far as examples of this on D2L. This will come back to you in the exam when we get to that. 4 types of observation. Complete participant. The group does not know that the participant is being an observer as well. So it's a hidden process. They're not informed of what's happening, but they're observing and participating in what's going on. Right? The participant as observer they're in a dual role. They are being a full participant and they're also observing for data collection purposes. So they're fulfilling that dual role. The observer as participant, again, the group knows that they're observing, but they're more of a spectator and not really participating in what's happening. They're more watching. Okay. And then our complete observer is a process where they're completely immersed in what they're doing, but they're also observing, and the group does not know that they are observing. So we want to understand where we need to be if we're doing observation data collection and understanding which role the observer is playing. For more information about this, look on page 257 in D2L because it gives you some examples of different types of observers that are participating in data collection. Some strengths of observation: high level detailed information. We can look at everyday life. We can comprehend what's going on and the dynamics of the setting and what the group is doing. And we see verbals and nonverbals as well. Some limitations of that, then it's time consuming, labor intensive, can cost money. We want to ensure inter-rater reliability, so you might have more than one observer observing the same thing. And then, of course, bias can be a problem because we're looking at what's going on through our lens. Another type of data collection is our biophysical data collection. So it's objective data, it's highly reliable, valid as long as our instruments are working properly. We use this for quasi-experimental and experimental type studies, and we can use it alone in the study or with other methods. It just depends on what we're looking for and how we're using it. There's two main types of biophysical data collection: in vivo, which we use a mechanism, an apparatus, a piece of equipment to gather information: electrocardiogram, blood pressure, pulse, heart rate, temperature, those kind of data points. And then in vitro is where we take a sample from the patient or the participant, body fluid, tissue, and the like, and then we analyze that. So those are the two different types, and we're going to talk about limitations and strengths of those. So advantages of these: objective, precise, independent of bias. Values that we gain are really good as long as the person doing the measurement is well trained. And then some limitations is cost of the measurements, knowledge of the person's doing those, might need some extra help. Cost and time commitments can be high. Participants may not want to participate if you have to draw their blood, right? And if you're taking a tissue from them, you have to have consent for that. And just like with consent to do the study, an extra consent to take a specimen. Then moving on to, we talked a lot in the beginning about existing or secondary data collection. So that builds on pre-existing information collected. We talked about retrospective studies with different types of chart reviews, documents, doctors' notes, nurses' notes, different kind of things. So any kind of data that's already out there, we call secondary or existing data. Back up. Went too far. And there's some advantages to that. It's already there. We don't have to ask anybody for permission. We can collect the pieces that we need, and we can explore different conclusions based on what we can find. Not so expensive, and we can get fuller evaluation of the information. So those are all advantages. Then disadvantages, though, are we can't ask any more questions. We're restricted. Can we get access? What if we can't find the information we're looking for? So it can lead to some frustration. We can't ask any more information than what's provided, so that can be problematic. With our systematic analysis or meta-analyses, again, we'll do a literature review. We find what's out there in the literature that's existing. We synthesize that information or run more studies based on the studies provided, and we get more information. So non-experimental, remember. And then the 5 steps of doing the systematic analyses or meta-analyses: find out what question you're asking, look in the literature, see what studies have found, look at that literature and look at the summary of the findings, run the data from there and see what we get. So with the data collection portion of your research study, we want to see what is the purpose of our research, what design are we using, what sampling methodology are we going to use, and then what data collection strategy best fits what we're doing. That we have cost, that we have access, what time constraints do we have, do we need to use more than one method depending on what kind of study we're doing, and there are strengths and limitations that are considered based on the selection process of our sampling method and our data that's collected. With evidence-based practice, we really rely on our chart reviews to see what problems are going on with practice and how can we make those better. So that's where our evidence-based practice considerations comes in with the data collection. I added this case study from another source that I want you to look at. Here's the information background about that. Here are the questions to consider. Think about those ahead of your test. So by Monday, I'll have the answers up in the discussion board for you to take a look at regarding these. So it's not an assignment that you need a Dropbox. Just look at it for your own learning. And if you have questions about it, let me know. Here's your summary points. I'm not going to read these for you. That just kind of synthesizes what we've talked about. I do want to draw your attention to this summary piece about how important establishing inter-rater reliability is when we're doing data collection or creating a tool for data collection. So here's your first voiceover PowerPoint lecture presentation of the semester. I'll be doing more of these as we move forward. If I'm looking better, I'll put a live video instead of my photo here, but just wanted to get us started. If you have questions, discussion board is a great place for questions, and we'll keep moving forward, and I'll see you with the next one.